Moscowitz here. Welcome to the program. I'm in the process of transitioning my program to a live evening slot, which I hope to roll out officially in January. I'm planning on doing the program Monday through Friday, 10 p.m. to 11 and eventually midnight. And I am beginning to start to schedule some guests for this time slot. I'm not sure how that's going to go over. Most people don't want to be up this late, I guess. To me, it's kind of interesting. It sort of reminds me of maybe an earlier time in my life when I used to like to do stuff very late. I mean, I think at this point, I'm doing it both for personal reasons, because it does clear my schedule in the day to do other things that I'm kind of getting more involved in right now. They're things that, frankly, are more lucrative for me. And also family obligations that come up during the day. And this evening time slot is good for me because this is my time, between 10 p.m. and midnight. I've got this great little office up here in the attic of my home in Boston, where I live. And I can come up here and just do what I got to do. And that is this fantastic live stream experience for me. And my hope is, as I roll this thing out, and again, I'm not going to be officially doing it until January 1st. And I'm pretty sure, I'm almost 100% sure, that I am going to commit myself to this. My hope is to build an online live community. People who maybe like me are a bit like night owls, at least if you're in the Eastern time zone. If you're Central Mountain or Pacific, it's earlier. And you want to discuss issues with a little bit more depth, because I think that, and I could be way off base on this, but my impression is that maybe at this time slot, I might not attract the kind of censorship that I would otherwise attract. I think that, from years of listening to late night talk radio, when I say late night, I'm talking, like 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. Back in the old days, Larry King did it. Some of the great Steve Fredericks did it. Larry Glick did it here in Boston for many years. There were many other great overnight, late hosts. You're allowed to, Jeff Renzi, you're given a little bit more leeway in terms of what you can talk about. You can discuss conspiracy. You can discuss strange stuff, stuff that's considered, outside of the conventional. And you're not going to attract that kind of attention. Now, for me, that means that I don't have to perhaps feel as censored when discussing things that are forbidden topics right now. Things like the pandemic, things like the vaccine, therapeutic treatment, the politics around the vaccine. Certainly the 2020 election is still verboten. I don't know if the Capitol incursion is forbidden or not, but my hope is to start to test those waters very carefully, still using a certain level of censorship, because that's the way it is. So we have to sometimes speak in euphemisms, but nevertheless, beginning to forge forward in my pursuit of doing that which I've wanted to do, that which I started out to do when I began this online experience a couple of years ago. And that is to build a real online community where people can call in, they can get used to following the program, we can talk together, we can exchange ideas, we can argue, we can, get into all sorts of really deep and hopefully very penetrating talk on a variety of issues. I'm hoping to really open the portal a little bit here and discuss issues that are a little bit more in depth than what one might do, certainly in a morning show or even in an afternoon show. So I should mention that again, Monday through Friday, 10 p.m. to 11 and up to midnight. And the unique thing about this program is that it is not only live, but I can take calls and you can call in and be heard. And as I develop the technology, I'll be able to make that more known. But for now, I'm only in the experimental stages. So you can call in if you happen to be listening live, 617-396-4958, 617-396-4958. And I also think that perhaps doing a late night program, once I get things off the ground and once I start getting guests on and I kind of get into the rhythm of it and I get my sea legs and all the rest, I will be in a position where I could put together some sponsors, maybe get some radio stations on board if I improve the audio enough, and I think that it's pretty good right now, and really start to launch a real late night experience that has momentum. All right, so 617-396-4958. Before I get into the issues, I just want to touch upon an issue that's covered in my latest book, Sociology for Conservatives, and that is the concept of collective effervescence. Collective effervescence is the result of a natural tendency in society for all of us to have a group experience, a collective experience, for better or for worse. I mean, that could be a religious experience. When we go to synagogue or a church or mosque or place of worship, we come together as a community for a similar purpose. We worship in unison. We chant together. We sing songs together. We have a group experience, and it uplifts us, and it becomes sort of, in a very broad sense, what sociologist Emil Durkheim called collective effervescence. You end up, I think this happens when you go to a rock concert. I think it happens when you go to a symphony. You know, you're there with other people. It's a little bit more passive in that case because you're not interacting, but you're experiencing something together, and it's something that can uplift and bring you outside of yourself and transform you and put you into a different place. And, you know, we begin to have greater perceptions of the world around us and who we are. And sometimes in the process of that experience, you can very intensely think about something in a way that you hadn't thought about it before. And it can be very creative. It could be almost like a dream state. You know, this is what prayer is in a way, when you do it as a group, as opposed to a personal prayer when you're alone. And this is a positive force in the universe when applied positively. I also think that there's an aspect to this that has created political movements. But the problem with it and the downside to it is that people can be manipulated in a mass way by use of propaganda. And while we in America have always prided ourselves on our individual consciousness first, and that's a factor that sociologists have acknowledged. And again, I'm studying sociology. I think that mankind has generally come out of a massive collectivist consciousness. And to the degree that we've come out of it is the degree to which we've advanced. And we can participate in a collective experience, but generally the American form has been to do so without forgetting who we are, to do so as individuals choosing to participate in a very specific experience for a very specific reason. We all go through these experiences where we have to, in a certain way, suspend elements of our own consciousness in order to make it work. Look, I mean, I've worked in offices before where I get a cubicle and I sit at a desk and I'm doing sales or I'm doing some other function. It's not really what I want to do. I'm not in love with it, quite frankly. Neither is anyone else in that office. But we all go there because we want to accomplish a certain thing. And it's not just to make money, although that is a big part of it, of course. But it's, we're suspending a portion of what we really want to do at that time, what we really are thinking about. We suppress certain elements of what we're thinking and of even who we are in order to make that experience work. And I think there's an element of that, frankly, in any relationship. You have to do that. That's part of marriage. In order to make a marriage work, you have to, in a certain way, at times, turn a bit of a blind eye to certain things that might be going on with your spouse or with yourself and your feelings toward your spouse in order to make it work, because you were striving for the more important aspect, which is the togetherness and the love and the necessity and the desire to live together and to form a relationship that has more pluses than minuses. So we, almost in an individual way, we engage in a certain degree of collective effervescence, if you will, because you have to get through life. The problem is that what I would call, and I mean this very generically, the ruling class, okay? And I know I sound like a Marxist here. The controllers of the world in a broad sense. I don't mean that people are sitting around and plotting control of the world, although I do think that is happening. But I mean this more philosophically. They have figured out, in the modern sense, to a certain degree, how to create this sense of collective effervescence by which we accept certain conditions on an emotional ground that are not in our best interests and that are not consonant with what is true and what is right and what is real and what is moral at times. And they do it out of their own twisted self-interest. They do it because they believe that they have some kind of a divine right to control us, to control the world. So they've learned how to manipulate us. One of the master manipulators was a man by the name of Edward Bernays. He was the nephew of Sigmund Freud, and he was the author of a book called Propaganda. He's considered to be the father of modern public relations. Edward Bernays came up with techniques to create a desire in people for certain products. He was trying to sell hamburgers. He got women to smoke cigarettes by marketing cigarettes in a certain way that made it look appealing to women. He popularized bacon and eggs for the American breakfast. He was hired by probably the egg board or the pork industry to do this. And he used techniques of mass manipulation to get people to do this and to make people feel, to internalize this as something that they should do at some point, to bring them in, and then to make this into a habitual thing. And so we develop habits. And I think that the controllers of these techniques develop tactics that is certainly eventually became subliminal. I read an interesting book, probably it must have been 30 years ago. I forget the author, but it was called Subliminal Seduction. And it showed, and a lot of the tactics that ad agencies were using at the time, I think were outlawed. And I could look into this. I'll probably do some research on this one. Maybe I'll bring it up tomorrow. But that they actually were putting messages into images. Like they would take, you see an ad for, for vodka or for, scotch and soda or some product, some alcohol product. And they would make the ice in the glass very sensual. And it would show sexual images that you didn't consciously see, but your mind would see it, and it would go into your passive mind, and it would make you think, oh boy, that looks sexy, that looks fun, I should have that. You know what I mean? It manipulates a certain level of desire that you may not be aware of. And there's some very strange things in that book about how they did this. I mean, I suppose one of the most famous examples was and I think this is outlawed, but when you went to a movie, in the beginning, they would flash on the screen, like in short, quick, bing, 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 it was almost invisible to the eye, images of popcorn or candy or, drinks, and ding, boom, boom. And it would like go into your subconscious and you would want to get popcorn. That's where the movie house made most of its money. And I think that was outlawed, but I only bring this up to note that this idea of implanting ideas using methodologies that are pretty advanced, it's not new. In fact, I would argue that it's the entire basis historically and prehistorically of idol worship. And that's what God warned us about in the Torah. This is why we weren't to engage in idol worship, because it was false, and because the idol as a false entity was actually something that was invented by people who wanted to manipulate and control populations. The idol didn't have any power. The idol was just a bag of bones. I mean, it was a bag of rocks that were painted in a certain way to look imposing. The idol was the people who were putting ideas into the idol's mouth and doing magic tricks and wizardry to get the population to do certain things, to get the population to throw the virgin into the volcano once a year to appease these gods, these false gods. The gods were not real. They were completely made up. They were completely manufactured by a ruling class and by a ruling elite. This was the main message of the Torah. This is what the ancient children of Israel, the Israelites of ancient times, what they had to struggle against alone in the world, while the rest of the world was worshiping these idols, which were state entities. And there were all the sin and the licentiousness and degradation and depravity that was around the idols, that was ripping people away from the development of their own individual consciousness and bringing them into keeping them into a collective state, a weakened state. And yet that's very alluring. It kind of answers all the questions of the universe. It deals with desire. It deals with pleasure. It deals with, the 7 deadly sins. It's like all of this stuff. And so the ancient Israelites struggled to fight this. And every time they prevailed, they would be closer to God. They would know God, and they would be successful. And every time they would backslide, they would get away from God. They would get away from spirituality and holiness. And they would fall into idolatry and sin, and they would become weak, and they would eventually be destroyed or conquered. Christianity basically brought this rejection of idol worship to much of the world. This is why I believe that Jesus of Nazareth is a bridge figure. He's in my opinion, a prophet, and someone who his ministry resulted in much of the world rejecting this false belief system, and that pretty much has pervaded and has developed the entire universe. All of the world, all religions, to varying degrees, have embraced the idea that originally started with the Torah and eventually advanced through the Christian methodology and belief. And so we have in modern times the continuation of a reversion to a more modern form of idol worship. And that's what I mean by propaganda. That's a negative propaganda, not a propaganda by which conscious people enter into a situation, they participate, they think about it, they know why they're there, they know what they want to get out of it, and they proceed in a very limited way. That's the American approach, because collective effervescence is natural. It is more the sublimation of the person, the sacrifice of their own interests, the surrender of their own consciousness for a false god. And I believe that the powerful, the elites, have learned how to manipulate the masses to a certain degree, that they can cause this negative, destructive, and dare I suggest, satanic form of collective effervescence. I happen to believe that that has been accentuated in our own time by the Trump presidency. People on the left have always opposed anyone who disagrees with their agenda. And when I say opposed, and the left, I would argue, is a false god. It's not real. They're not seeking truths. They're seeking control, physical control. They're seeking they desire to overthrow truth and create new paradigms. Not that there isn't some good that comes out of that, okay? I mean, I'm not, I don't want to be too general, but the point is that they have always sought to divide society, and they have never sought to debate or discuss issues with their opponents. They have always instead sought to destroy their opposition. They don't want to debate. They need to destroy, because if they're living in a false universe with false gods, it has to be a hermetically sealed universe that does not allow anything to enter into it that would contradict it. Otherwise, they might wake up to the falseness of their own universe, and they do everything they can to prevent that. I mean, look at human nature. When you've made mistakes in your life and you get older, it's very difficult, and it's actually quite unlikely that you're going to admit your mistakes. It's hard to admit your mistakes anyways, but it becomes more calcified in a way when you get older. Well, the left does not want to acknowledge flaws in its own core belief system. So it seeks to destroy any external stimuli, any attempt to pierce that cage that they live in. And so they don't want to debate their opponents in a reasonable way. They want to destroy their opponents. And I think that the presidency of Donald Trump, I really think this, has been a tipping point in their quest. They've been working for centuries, well, really going all the way back to pagan times and to the idol worship. But in this country, in the modern sense, they've been really taking a foothold since, I would contend, the early part of the 20th century. I peg it to the administration of Woodrow Wilson and his chief advisor, Edward Mandell House. It's an interesting history of how that happened. Too much to get into right now. Maybe I'll do this tomorrow night. I'm not going to really stay on that much longer here. But suffice to say that from that time until today, they have worked very hard to create this false, dangerous, amoral, I would suggest immoral state that they want to merge the United States into this one world ant colony. They believe that sovereignty and all of the institutions that make us who we are, the conservative institutions, frankly, that's why I talk about conservative sociology, like property, like family, like individual consciousness itself, like love, like loyalty, like money, of course, and production and property, and the right to trade goods and services, all of it. That these things are anachronisms that need to be worn away in favor of a return to this mythical cosmic collectivism, this one brain for the universe, and that they have made major strides since the Wilson administration. They were able to privatize our monetary system with the Federal Reserve. They were able to have 2 world wars. They've controlled the value of our currency, our money, our property, through depressions and inflations in a way that they never could before. They've launched world revolutions like Nazism and communism, and I would suggest radical Islam. They have now launched the most dangerous of all, which is transhumanism. I recommend, for more information about this, you check out the work of Joe Allen. He's linked to Steve Bannon's War Room Pandemic site. You just click on transhumanism. He's doing an incredible job of documenting this. I'm going to try to have him on the show. In fact, that should happen in a week or two. And they're trying to mechanize their worship of the false god through mechanics, artificial intelligence, neogenetics, neo-eugenics, I should say. I mean, I discussed this a little earlier today with David. This idea that man could be evolved into a superior species. And so in a way, because of the incredible advances and the rapid advances in technologies, they are moving much faster than the Nazis or the communists or the radical Islamists could have ever dreamed of moving. And it's a very dangerous time as a result. Then comes Donald Trump. They hated on anyone who was a Republican, sure, but they were tolerated. Trump could not be tolerated because Trump stood for certain principles that threatened their entire rotten edifice. If Trump had been, he was successful, but if he had been allowed to be more successful, the more successful he was, the more he exposed the falseness and the emptiness of their mass movement, which is a top-down thing. And so they had to destroy Trump, literally. We're now finding out, and not that people on my side didn't always know this, but we're finding out from the John Durham Special Prosecutor's Office, there's already been 1 conviction and 2 indictments of people who are hatching this conspiracy against Trump to try to take him out of office, or to at least cripple him to the point where he couldn't function. And there were very high-level people involved in that. These were the same high-level people, frankly, who were involved in making sure that he did not win a second term. Now, I'm not going to get into that right now, but it's a very well-documented fact. Even Time magazine kind of blew the whistle on it a few weeks after the election. So, sometimes they do have to put out a few truths. But the point is that when I talk about this, I'm talking about the people who are consciously and wittingly trying to stop the Trump movement before it becomes too powerful and before we emerge and wake up, and enough people wake up. And they mean business. They're going to do whatever they have to do. They don't care if they have to kill hundreds of thousands of people by putting diseased COVID-19 people in nursing homes in order to cull the population. Whatever it is, they'll get the numbers up. They'll do whatever they have to do. All right. We're talking about very amoral and immoral people, evil people, frankly. And it's all part of this transhumanism movement. You've got that part going, the conscious part, the elitists, the world rulers. But you have the result is that by means of propaganda and manipulation, they have hypnotized millions of people, millions of Americans even, not to mention people in other countries. But what's shocking to me is that it has happened to Americans because we have been more aware of who we are, aware that we answer to God and not the state, aware of our own self-interest and what that means. But they have hypnotized them to the point where they don't even know why, they hate anything that stands for Trump because of this constant propaganda, and yet they don't know why. They can't articulate it. Oh, he's mean. He sent out a mean tweet. He's not a nice guy. This kind of crap. But there's something more strange going on with this. I get into this in my book. So check out my book, by the way, Sociology for Conservatives. There's something very strange and very unnatural about the Trump haters. I've noticed it from the minute he ran. I noticed it the day after he won. I could tell you, I'm sure that anybody in my position can recount stories of witnessing people having a complete meltdown. And it's completely irrational. It's not logical. It's not real. It's people who, this is why I'm saying that the rulers have developed what I, again, call collective effervescence to the point where they can really pull strings and manipulate people. It's like everyone has a computer chip implanted in the back of their brains, and they send up this stimuli. I'm going to just end this by just giving a mild example here. And it's actually a conversation that I heard recently where these people were attacking Green Bay Packers quarterback Aaron Rodgers as being a wacko. Now, why were they attacking Aaron Rodgers? What did Aaron Rodgers do to deserve the attack? Well, for one thing, he did get COVID-19, and he was mildly sick for maybe a few days. Then he was back on the field. He did not get the injection, and he took a certain therapeutic drug, which, because of censorship, I can't mention what it is, okay? It begins with an I. It is the same drug that was taken by podcaster Joe Rogan, who also contracted the COVID virus. Both of these men were cured very quickly from the virus. Now, I'm not a doctor, and I'm not making any claims that this drug caused their being cured. I don't know that, and I'm not against the vaccine. I've taken the vaccine myself. I am bringing this up from a sociological perspective to talk about why these average, well-meaning, normal people had this intense reaction against Aaron Rodgers in this case, and I've also heard it against Joe Rogan because he took this drug and because he was cured of his COVID-19 illness very quickly and because he didn't take the vaccine. Why did they have that reaction to that? What business is it of theirs that he was cured? You would think that we would celebrate that. Now, I don't exactly know why. I simply bring this up as an illustration of what I'm talking about. Collective effervescence. People are having these strange and inexplicable, and I would suggest, quite frankly, irrational reactions to these stimuli based upon reasons that they can't explain. And I think it has everything to do with the Trump hatred that was ginned up almost as a form of Chinese water torture, drip, 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 every day by the mainstream media, both witting and unwitting. And this demonization, and now it's spread. It's I do compare it to what happened in Nazi Germany against the Jews. The state decided to demonize the Jewish people, and they used their methodologies of propaganda to do that. And they were successful at it until eventually the bubble burst. But of course, before it burst, you had 6 million Jews lose their lives, and you had a world war that cost the world another 6 million people, and terrible devastation. We don't want to see that happen this time. What I will just say is that one way or the other, regardless of how much pain it's going to cost, the truth will come out, and they will not win. But right now, they're dealing with much more dangerous weapons than the Nazis had, or the communists. Again, I think it comes under this broad rubric of transhumanism, which I'm going to be getting into, but I'll do that another time. So those are my thoughts for tonight. I'm just, again, I am launching this program. It's going to be Monday through Friday, 10 p.m. to midnight. I'm going to be taking calls. I'm going to be taking on guests. The phone number is 617-396-4958, 617-396-4958. I have about 10 live streams that are carrying the show, and I'm intending to increase that number and possibly approaching some radio stations to carry the show once I get off the ground. That'll probably happen, I hope, in January, maybe February of next year. I'm also obviously looking for sponsors. Someday I might even get paid for this. Who knows? It'll be bigger than what my wife says it is, which is a hobby. And she's not wrong, right? I have a day job. Anyway, on that note, I'm just going to again mention that the program is sponsored by my books. I'm the author of about a dozen nonfiction books. Let me just hold up one of them because I happen to have it here on my desk. This is my second most recent book. It's called The Satanic Conspiracy, The Spectre Haunting Mankind. This is available at Amazon Books, but I particularly want to suggest my most recent book, which is called Sociology for Conservatives, an American Conservative Social Theory, also available at Amazon Books, both as a soft cover and Kindle, or I think Barnes & Noble books as well. You can request it from a bookstore if you want. You can request it from your library if you want. But the easiest way to get it is just order it off of Amazon Books. I'm very proud of the fact that I got this out. I'm hoping to launch a conservative social theory that might someday become part of the lexicon of sociology. So the sociology will no longer be a tool of the left, but that sociology will become balanced and more rational. That's all I ask. Anyways, it's been great to be here. Thank you very much. I'm looking forward to having guests on. I'm going to start to book people probably in the next week or so to bring people on. It's amazing what you can do just sitting here at a computer. And on that note, I want to thank you for joining me tonight. God bless you all. God bless America. Merry Christmas. Happy Hanukkah. And have a wonderful rest of the evening. Thank you. Goodbye, everybody.